What about the trust here? Because as we pointed out yesterday, we'll point out again today, the president's words are saying negotiation, but again, the actions are saying war. He's sending more troops to the region, including paratroopers.
Yeah, and a senior diplomat inside Tehran tonight has told me that actually those words from President Trump yesterday saying that the U.S. has won this war, that they've demolished Iran's capabilities when it comes to Navy, when it comes to air, when it comes to their military, this diplomat is telling me that that rhetoric is unhelpful, given that the U.S. is sending more troops to this region. Those 3,000 paratroops, many Marines as well, coming via USS Tripoli to this part of the world. But clearly, we know that Iran's military hasn't really been impacted, or not enough to for it to completely stop. It carries out its attacks on the Gulf and inside Israel. But you're right, trust is the big thing here. How can Iran trust the US when over the last two times there were negotiations, they broke down and essentially Iran felt that they got burnt because the US and Israel carried out attacks inside Iran? But also, how do the Gulf nations trust Iran here as well? They seem to trust Pakistan by taking on this role as some form of a mediator, particularly Saudi Arabia, who've got close ties with Pakistan. But trust very much is at the core of any negotiations, any conversations going ahead, particularly over the next 48 hours, where it feels that Pakistan are quite confident that something could come of it.
All right, let's talk about the fears of a recession growing. Justin, help me understand why folks like Moody's and Mark Zandi and Goldman Sachs are changing their estimates, their outlook for the future.
Katie, it sounds like you spent your morning the same way I did. I woke up, I made myself a delicious cup of coffee, a cappuccino, and started just looking through analyst notes. And as I went through my email page after page after page, it's the next Wall Streeter marking down their estimates for the future of the economy, getting worried about the future path of inflation. We've seen Goldman Sachs change its odds of a recession from 20% to 25%, and then from 25% to 30%. What's underlying all of this is tremendous uncertainty about the duration and intensity of what happens in Iran, a sense that if this lasts longer than the 4 to 5 weeks that the president promised, and remember we're at week 3 3/4 right now, that this could do real and lasting damage, and a sense that oil prices are going to remain higher for longer than the administration had originally planned on.
All right, let me play Scott Bessent defending the war on Meet the Press on Sunday.
Sometimes you have to escalate to de-escalate. About 140 million barrels are out on the water. In essence, we are jiu-jitsuing the Iranians. We're using their own oil against them.
Would the administration ever raise taxes in order to fund this war?
Again, Kristen, the terrible framing.
Okay, why is Scott Bessent selling this war? Is he the Secretary of State? Is he the Secretary of Defense? Is he in the National Security Council?
No. The administration thinks that he is the best suited person to communicate with a nervous Wall Street. That's the only reason why here. So it was something that was a bit startling to see him on Sunday fronting this war and critiquing the journalism of a former colleague as well, the framing of that question. But look, he, since the beginning of this conflict, has tried to posit ways in which the administration could do more to help the economy, pacify nervous investors. And each of those has run up against a wall. Early on, he was talking about a level of reinsurance. He was talking about naval escorts. We haven't seen those either. And we've seen, to use his phrase, a lot of jiu-jitsuing around the sanctions that have been put in place, not just by this administration, but the Biden administration as well. None of this has had a noticeable effect on the price of oil, which has remained very high. And we've seen, yes, volatility in the markets, but there's still, among, I think, serious investors, a recognition of the fact that there is a disconnect between the story on the ground and what they perceive to be the case.
There's also the curious case of the timing of Donald Trump's announcements about whether he's going to attack further or whether he's going to pull back. They seem to be tied to the markets, the end of day when the markets can't react or when the markets are off. John Bolton, who served as Trump's national security advisor, is quoted in The Atlantic. He said that during Donald Trump's first term, foreign policy announcements were sometimes timed with trading hours in mind. Jonathan Lemire has said that, according to his reporting, Trump has in the past alerted aides when he thought an upcoming social media post would get a reaction from Wall Street and then watch the ticker move in real time. So does it appear that Donald Trump is making these announcements regarding war in Iran in order to manipulate the markets?
I can't say that he's doing that on purpose, but to take John Bolton at his word, perhaps there is that element of timing. In fact, here, and you saw reporting in the Financial Times this week about a really sizable trades in oil that were done before this announcement was made on Monday morning. Of course, over the course of the weekend, investors had a chance to digest what the president had done or said he was going to do over the course of the weekend. Look, I think that there were a lot of things that raise eyebrows here about the way that the president's announcing these and what the market reaction might be. I should note we're looking at a regulator of the securities industry that's been greatly neutered during his presidency. We saw the head of enforcement step aside just a few days ago as well. So there are very real questions to ask. Yeah. You're asking them about what he's doing and who's profiting from that as a result.
Justin, what about you?
Look, this idea that there was someone insider trading just before the latest announcement, I think the evidence on that's actually remarkably weak. There's lots of different securities people could look at, lots of different time periods, and by the time you take all that into account, it really could just be a coincidence. But the deeper question is there's no doubt in my mind that the president has been saving big announcements for after markets have closed. The latest Iran bombing actually began while they were awake and America was asleep. And the president's thinking it was more important to take American markets by surprise than it was to surprise the Iranians. This feedback loop from markets to policy, policy to markets is a very troubling way of making policy, because as soon as folks on Wall Street realize that the president is looking at what they're doing, that changes how they act. And that can actually make the whole loop a little self-defeating.
And it could also change how Iran acts or our allies act if they believe that they can predict what Donald Trump might do based on whether the markets are open or closed or up or down. Caroline Leavitt, by the way, Inzi was asked about the multi-point plan that the president put forward, the peace deal that he put forward for Iran. Here's what she said.
Thank you, Caroline. Just within the past few hours, Iranian state TV has said that Iran has rejected the U.S.'s 15-point plan to end the war. What's the White House's response to that, and have these talks hit a dead end?
They have not. Talks continue. They are productive, as the president said on Monday, and they continue to be. However, I saw a 15-point plan that was floated in the media. I would caution reporters in this room from reporting about speculative points or speculative plans from anonymous sources. The White House never confirmed that full plan. There are elements of truth to it, but some of the stories I read were not entirely factual. So I am not going to negotiate on behalf of the president here at the podium. What I will tell you is these talks are ongoing. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details that have been exchanged between the United States and Iran at this time.
Inzi, leaving aside those details, the talk was at the beginning of this war that this was a war of choice. Donald Trump decided to do this, but now it's turning for some into a war of necessity, arguably, that the Strait of Hormuz being closed, Iran being able to use that as leverage against the Americans, and the way in which they've acted toward the region and their neighbors has turned this into something that the U.S. cannot just pick up and walk away from easily, that there would be devastating consequences. What's the outlook out there?
Well, look, Donald Trump and his advisors have essentially got themselves in a box now of their own making, and clearly they're trying to find a way out of it. Caroline Leavitt didn't say or didn't exclude the fact that there wasn't a plan on the table that had been put forward to Pakistan to hand over to Iran. Clearly, there is. Whether it's 15 points or less, or what are those 15 points, is obviously a greater question. But look, the reaction out here is that they want this war to end as soon as possible, because, as you were mentioning there, talking about the economics of it all, well, they're feeling the economics here desperately across the whole of the Gulf. We've got some of the largest oil refineries in this region. They have been targeted specifically by Iran over the last month. The Strait of Hormuz remains shut. Oil can't get through. 20% of it, usually, of the world's oil passes through that waterway. It's Iran currently benefiting by getting their oil to the likes of India and China. Qatar has seen a drop-off of 17% of oil production. They believe it will take 5 years to rebuild that type of production because of the attacks on some of its facilities in that country. So look, the economic effects are really being felt here in this region as well. And the Gulf nations will be pushing the US. They'll also be pushing now Pakistan to try and get some form of negotiation, to try and de-escalate this conflict, and to ensure that Iran is not a dangerous neighbor that could attack these states whenever it wishes to do so.